Internships are really valuable for people who can get them because you get in the door, you learn an industry, you learn how it works, the amount of skills that you're able to pick up and relationships to get these opportunities. And progressives want to make internships, unpaid internships, literally illegal. They currently are legal, but it's only barely. You have to pass this Byzantine 7-factor test in order to be lawful. Um, two of these measures are one that you can't displace a single regular employee with an intern, and even worse, the company can not achieve an immediate advantage by hiring them. It's insane. And there's 3 states, California, New York, and Connecticut, that pile on additional regulations to make it even worse. You also have to tie the internship to a particular academic program, and it's just insane. So once more, people have these feel good. I mean, they hear a story about how Billy, he's got this unpaid internship, and what are they? They're not paying him anything. Oh my God, there ought to be a law. Not realizing how incredibly valuable for both parties this relationship is, and some numbskull idiot congressperson wants to come along and make it literally illegal to have that relationship. It's madness, and again, it hurts the poor and the young the worst. Hello there, and welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman. I am joined by my erudite and spiky friend Tyrone, the porcupine hobo. How you doing, my man?
Word up, my crony.
My cronies. Ladies and gentlemen, when you hear the my cronies explication, you know that you're in for a treat. This is part 7 of our series where we are covering Hunter Lewis's brand new book. Well, not brand new, but new-ish. Economics in 3 Lessons. That's what it looks like. Go to Mises.org if you want to pick yourself up a copy. And this is the 7th installment. We're on chapter 15. A couple of more episodes, or we're going to get into the 100 economic laws. It's going to be pretty awesome, folks. Yeah. Bear with us.
Yeah, so we're getting through the theory part of it, the foundational theory stuff, right? And then we'll get into more of the hardcore, concrete economic laws afterwards. So, as Adam said, we are continuing our journey. We're in lesson 3, and we're going to cover chapters 15, 16, and 17 in this episode. So, folks, grab your copy that you've purchased at the Mises.org and
read along for fun and profit.
Right. Hey, if we were doing this live one day, somebody could put in some live chats and we could do a Q&A, but one
fine day.
All right, so chapter 15, titled, Where Does This Leave the Poor?
Good and properly screwed.
Perennial question libertarians get all the time, well, if you take away all the government programs, what happens to the poor? Hey, that's a legitimate question, right? I mean, if you can't answer that, then you can just throw out libertarianism, because what's the point?
Good point.
All right, so here we go. It is impossible to say how many people are poor in the United States and elsewhere. Government statistics often intentionally obscure the facts. For example, in the United States, the biggest federal poverty program, the Earned Income Tax Credit, pays 27 million taxpayers $60 billion in cash. But like Section 8 housing vouchers and Medicaid, the Earned Income Tax Credit payments are excluded when the government totes up who is poor and who is not. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Moreover, since the crash of 2008, more and more formerly middle-class people have slipped into a state of near poverty. For example, they can no longer afford to buy a reliable automobile. And without, if I was going to rewrite this sentence, I would replace the word automobile with vehicle. Vehicle. and without a reliable automobile,
Automobile?
find their employment options limited not only by the economy, but also by transportation barriers. In addition, they may own a home that cannot find a buyer, which means they cannot easily move to another state with more jobs. There's supposed to be a social safety net for the truly poor, an array of government programs that was greatly expanded after the crash of 2008. Of that net, GOP candidate Mitt Romney said during the 2012 presidential campaign, quote, "I'm not concerned about the very poor."
Brilliant. How did he lose?
I mean, what? Sorry. Don't take things out of context.
I'm sure he had more to say.
Quote, "I'm not concerned about the very poor. We have a safety net there. If it needs repair, I'll fix it." Unquote.
Sure you will, Mitt.
Can there really be any doubt that it needs fixing? A Senate subcommittee found that the U.S. government in 2012 was making welfare payments equivalent to $168 per day for every household whose income fell below the official poverty line. Since median income of all Americans is $137 a day, it is clear that only a small part of the $168, equivalent to about $36,000 a year, is actually reaching the poor. Say what?
What do you know?
Much of the money is going to other people, including government workers who, supported by powerful public unions, are indirect but prime beneficiaries of poverty programs. Looking at all government transfer payments, not just those included in the congressional study, a study suggests that only 36% of the money goes to the bottom 20% of earners and even less to the truly poor. The greater part of the money goes to households headed by 65-year-olds or older, whose net worth is a stunning 47 times greater than households headed by under 35-year-olds. Hey, those boomers, man. You got to take care of those boomers. Man, did they come up with the ultimate scam? I mean, seriously. Social
And it's
Security is the greatest scam perpetrated. And those boomers just retiring at 62 and a half down in the villages in Florida playing golf.
I think they're going to pass away at exactly the right time too. Right when
They timed it
it
perfectly.
collapses. Yeah.
Just when it all runs out. Those
very
fucking
clever.
assholes.
Very, very clever.
Another feature of the welfare spending is that it does not just create disincentives to work. It actually taxes work at a far higher rate than that applied through the regular tax code. As economist Thomas Sowell has pointed out, a low income individual may find that the next $10,000 of earned income will reduce federal benefits by $15,000, which in effect represent a 150% tax rate.
Amazing.
This is completely unfair, but remains largely unacknowledged, much less addressed by public policy. I'm just going to pause there real quick because that reminds me of something Milton Friedman proposed, his negative income tax. Do you remember? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I remember it, but I don't recall the
Yeah,
details.
it's in the Free to Choose series. It's something about a way to wean people off of welfare without punishing them for earning more, and they get taxed more, which disincentivizes people from getting that higher paying job because it's diminishing returns, right?
Well,
So,
I mean, these programs say they're designed to help, but I just don't believe them because, as we just remarked, so very little of the money gathered together and taxed on these programs, a portion to these programs actually goes to the truly needy.
yeah.
It goes to other political classes. It goes to the government employees first and foremost. I mean, a government employee program doesn't want to solve a problem that would eliminate the cushy fiefdom. And it just doesn't surprise me at all that they do everything they can to disincentivize fixing the problem. And what Thomas Sowell here points out is just one of the most. You have to feel like a sucker if you're thinking about getting some low end job and giving up these welfare benefits.
Exactly.
You have to look like an absolute fool. It's much
Right.
more intelligent to go into the black market and find a way to boost your income under the
100%.
table so that you can keep collecting these things. And the fiefdom perpetuates itself, and the free market system, quote unquote, just gets blamed for poverty increasing. It's all a lie, folks. It's all a lie.
Continuing on. When thinking about welfare spending, we should also ask, where does the money come from? Nobody ever asked that.
No. Money just is, Tyrone.
It just grows on trees, man. In part, it comes from taxes paid by higher income earners, but much of it is borrowed. When the time comes to pay the interest or repay the debt, who will receive the money? Rich or poor? It will be the rich, of course, either rich Americans or rich foreigners or foreign central banks. It will not be the poor. Other government policies do not make things better. The federal minimum wage was raised in steps to $7.25 during and after the crash of 2008. This hurt impoverished, inexperienced young workers the most. So, why would anyone be surprised that the teenage unemployment rate rose to 26% in 2009, 39% for black teenagers, and 52% for all teenagers in Washington, D.C.? So, folks, if you don't, I know most folks watching the show understand libertarian economics and things like that. But if you really want an in-depth analysis by the great Walter Williams of how the minimum wage crushes, especially minority communities, read his book, State Against the Blacks. You'll never support the minimum wage again.
Word.
Obamacare, President Obama's signature and mandatory medical insurance program, compounded this problem by adding $2.28 to $5.89 of cost per hour for every full-time worker and more for part-time. How can an uneducated worker gain the experience and track record needed to earn such wages without work? And yet, how can he or she get the work without such mandated wages? If they are lucky, teenagers work today as interns for nothing. Why not at least allow a training wage so that idle teenagers could both learn and earn? Obamacare also encouraged the creation of accountable care organizations. Oh boy, that's an acronym that you put those words together, it can't be anything good. Accountable care organizations. Yeah, that makes sense. Where medical professionals were to be paid for health outcomes rather than on a fee for service basis. Because low income patients tend to have worse outcomes, ACOs were almost guaranteed over time to minimize the number of such patients. And who would decide the definition of a good outcome in the first place? You're certainly not asking the patient. I guarantee no government worker ever asked the patient afterwards, how was your outcome? Under market conditions, consumers ultimately choose what is good or bad at a given price. By doing so, they also define what healthcare is. If the government defines healthcare, it will ultimately be decided by the strongest special interests, including the American Medical Association, the big hospitals, big insurance, and drug companies, and other players. There is an even more basic problem for the poor. Each year, the price of everything increases. In part, the price increases are directly caused by government rules and mandates. Recently, the federal government required the installation of a black box in each automobile, which will give speed and other potentially incriminating information in the event of a crash. Like other government requirements, this will increase the price of a car. making it that much harder for the poor to buy one. I mean, that's a great point. Just on the car thing, Tom Woods has had a guest on the show multiple times who's a libertarian, has his own show, talks about cars a lot. And he points out that you can go to other countries like Mexico or whatever and get like American cars, like a Ford Taurus. That's not what comes to mind. I don't think they make that anymore, but for like $9,000 or cheaper, and it's just like as safe as like a 1995 or 2000 car was. It's got seat belts and airbags and everything like that. Why can't we get an affordable car in the United States? And also, Adam, you remember back in the 80s, they came out with these small pickup trucks, right? They're real small, right? When's the last time you saw one on the road? They're gone.
Yep, they're gone.
They're gone for one reason, because these stupid cafe standards, which you would think the purpose here we go, folks. Every government program has the opposite effect. What's the quote unquote purpose of the cafe standard? It's to make cars more fuel efficient, right? So you wouldn't think to yourself, well, wouldn't smaller vehicles, smaller trucks be more fuel efficient than a bigger SUV like these huge Ford F-150s that are just guzzling, get 12 miles to the gallon or something like that? How can that meet the cafe standards, but the little Ford Ranger or Chevy S10 that they used to have can't? It's because the cafe standards are defined something like by weight to miles, or it's something like that. It's not miles per gallon, it's size compared to weight. And so what the car manufacturers have figured out is like, well, we can meet the cafe standards just by building these huge ass cars and trucks, because the ratio makes them fuel efficient by definition, whereas they can't make the smaller ones any more fuel efficient, right? And they're too small. They don't meet the right ratio, or I'm not saying it quite right, but again, so that's why all the small little cars are gone. You can't get just a $9,000 good. What was wrong with the cars in the 90s? They were perfectly safe, but you got to have all these new technologies in them and blah blah blah. And
every time the government gets involved, it makes the thing you want to buy illegal and forces upon you all these things that cost extra. And of course, it hurts the poor the worst. They do the exact same thing on the other end, on the income side, when they put Obamacare and whatnot, making the cost effectively of hiring somebody, so expensive that it prices people out of the market. Government is just it's not what the headline says. It's not what it's not what the bill is called. It's what the actual results for actual people are, and they are always worse.
The Cash for Clunkers program, created after the crash of 2008, was supposed to assist both the automobile companies and low-income buyers, and to reduce car pollution as well. It mostly produced a lot of unintended consequences.
Oh yeah, it did.
First, it greatly reduced used car supply so that those prices rose, shutting out poor buyers. Second, it resulted in many poor quality loans that were followed by repossession.
Mm-hmm.
The buyer had lost his or her used car and now had no car at all. And finally, it led to more air pollution, not less, because of the way that car disposal rules were written. Parts that could have been recycled were not, for fear of cheating, but were instead incinerated.
You remember seeing that? Remember seeing the pictures of all these perfectly good cars just getting smushed up into cubes of metal, all to satisfy this stupid program.
I mean, what can you say? Government.
There's one more point before we move on. They were literally destroying economically valuable resources.
Mm-hmm.
Think of how you're on a desert island, you don't have anything. Think of how incredibly rich you get to the point where you have a used car.
Right.
And this program is deliberately crushing into useless cubes.
Yeah.
And pouring concrete into engines and whatnot. because of some stupid feel-good program designed to help who? I don't know. But
Yeah,
destroying economic resources doesn't help anybody, guys.
that's right. That's capital destruction.
Yep. Literally. Oh, my Lord.
Okay. Government licensing requirements raise the cost of even the most basic services for the poor. Haircutting costs more because employees are not allowed to learn by doing, but must take expensive prescribed courses. Childcare costs much more because the neighbor down the street is no longer allowed to take your children for the day in return for a payment. These rules are all introduced as consumer protections, but more often than not protect cartels of service providers and invariably raise prices, which hurts the poor most directly. Even the ability of the poor to escape the ghetto is impeded by rules against gypsy car services. And when local and state governments keep expanding to create and enforce these rules, the sales taxes may go up, which also hit the poor hardest. As important as all these price elevators are, they are not the chief way that government raises prices for the poor. As we have pointed out in earlier chapters, the free price system tends to drive down prices, while incontinent federal money creation keeps driving them up. This is not especially hard on the rich. They generally know how to protect themselves or even turn the inflation to their advantage by making shrewd investments in sectors where the new money created by the Fed is blowing up bubbles. Meanwhile, the middle class and the poor must work harder and harder to afford the same standard of living, or more likely, face a declining standard of living. There is no lack of excuses for what inflation does to the poor. Alan Blinder, vice chairman of the Fed under President Bill Clinton, says that, quote, the harm which inflation inflicts on the economy is often exaggerated,
What a
unquote.
guy.
What a guy.
What a guy.
What a guy. Man, inflation. Pshaw, pshaw, pshaw. I heard, though, this is all good. I agree with everything he's saying. But I heard that there's a third, even bigger reason why these factors hurt the poor, raise prices, and things like that. It's a conspiracy of the Roni Tories.
Yeah. Those pernicious Roni Tories, they keep popping up.
Blinder seems to think that lowering interest rates by printing more money will increase economic growth. Oh, by the way, we'll probably have to comment about this. Might as well just slip it in right now. Trump's 50-year mortgage plan.
It's so sick. Banks don't want to make these stupid things.
Oh my God.
I'm not even sure they ever wanted to make 30-year ones. These things aren't natural creations of the market. They
Yeah.
exist because Fannie and Freddie exist to buy up any mortgage created the second it is and
Right.
create a secondary market that's completely artificial. And now they're going to do the same for 50-year mortgages. I mean, the Marxists are always complaining that capitalism tries to make a debt slave out of you. It's like, are we trying to play into their hands?
Mm-hmm.
This is not capitalism, guys. This is something else.
Sure is. Let's see here. Oh, wait. Is it what Tucker Carlson calls libertarian economics?
Probably, yeah. We've been in charge for a century, Tyrone. It's just been a free market.
Holy. Oh my
Can't believe
God.
it's not working out.
Even the people I want to it hurts how little they know about economics. It's just it just hurts me.
Yeah, it's libertarian free market economics when you need 20,000 pages of federal regulations to pull it off. That's how you know.
Right. That's right. Okay. Blinder seems to think that lowering interest rates by printing more money will increase economic growth, that this will help the poor and reduce income inequality, and that inflation is a small price to pay for those gains. But none of this is actually true. Thwarting free prices, relentlessly and mindlessly interfering with interest rates and currencies in particular, leads to chronic instability and job destruction. Rising prices just add further to the miseries of the poor. As numerous studies have shown, Domingo Cavallo, finance minister of Argentina in the 1990s, was right when he stated that the poor are the foremost victims of inflation, followed only by the middle class. A variant of Blinder's argument has been voiced by Christina Romer, President Obama's chief chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. Money printing, she says, quote, tends to lower the price of the dollar, which is good for ordinary families,
That's
unquote.
amazing. That's an amazing quote. Wow.
Huh?
A DEI hire, I assume? What
DEI wasn't a thing back then.
uh, maybe they didn't call it that. That's astonishing. Let's just move on before I throw up.
Wow, that could not be just the opposite.
Yes.
It's just
Yes.
literally the opposite. The basic idea here is that consumer goods from China will be cheaper. What this ignores is that other countries will print just as much or more money in response. De facto currency devaluations will escalate endlessly. And again, bubble and bust will follow, producing mainly unemployment and suffering for the poor. Moreover, the very poorest of the poor will not be able to afford even the cheap imported goods. They will not even be able to afford to travel to the mall. They will be lucky if food is sold anywhere near where they live, and if it is, the price will likely be higher than elsewhere because of security risks for the store owner and lack of competition. If they are lucky enough to have a job, nothing they produce is likely to be exported and thus benefit from a wider market. All of this is equally true for the American slum dweller as for a poor and isolated Asian farmer. If the poor are able to buy imported goods, the things they need will probably have a higher tariff attached to them than the luxury goods intended for the rich. This is true in almost every country. For example, a study by the Progressive Policy Institute in the US showed that imported goods bought by poor and middle class people, for example, clothes and shoes, had an average tariff of 10.5% versus an average tariff of only 0.8% on luxury goods. Tariffs are not only a tax, albeit a hidden tax, they are a I can never say that word, Adam. Can I just replace it with
Peculiarly. Yes, you can.
rotatory?
Yes, you can. Yes, do that.
Tariffs are not only a tax, albeit a hidden tax, they are peculiarly. Why can't I say that word?
Say it faster. Peculiarly.
Peculiarly.
Faster.
Good God.
Peculiarly. You'll get
Tariffs are
there.
not only a tax, albeit a hidden tax. They are peculiarly regressive tax. Good
Nice, everybody.
God.
Everybody.
Jesus Christ. If we are at all serious about ending poverty, much less improving the plight of the poor, we need to acknowledge the utter perversity of what we are doing today and find a new way forward. Instead of focusing mostly on the gap between rich and poor, that is, relative poverty, we should focus more on absolute poverty, on getting people to a safe and reasonably comfortable standard of living that opens up choices and opportunities. There is not that much difference between having enough money and having an infinite amount of it. The goal should be to get everyone to enough. Government policy should support this by leaving prices free to do their job, not thwart it with toxic price manipulations and controls. Thus ends chapter 15.
All true. I want to go back to something he just glossed over quickly. Internships. Internships are really valuable for people who can get them because you get in the door, you learn an industry, you learn how it works. The amount of skills that you're able to pick up and relationships is. I mean, people stab each other in the back, not literally, to get these opportunities. And progressives want to make internships, unpaid internships, literally illegal. They currently are legal, but it's only barely. You have to pass this Byzantine 7-factor test in order to be lawful. Um, two of these measures are one that you can't displace a single regular employee with an intern, and even worse, the company can not achieve an immediate advantage by hiring them. It it's insane. Um, and there's 3 states, California, New York, and Connecticut, that pile on additional regulations to make it even worse. You also have to tie the internship to a particular academic program, and it's just insane. So once more, people have these feel good. I mean, they hear a story about how Billy, he's got this unpaid internship, and what are they? They're not paying him anything. Oh my God, there ought to be a law. Not realizing how incredibly valuable for both parties this relationship is, and some numbskull idiot congressperson wants to come along and make it literally illegal to have that relationship. It's madness, and again, it hurts. It hurts the poor and the young the worst.
And one other thing I want to go back on and comment about is that quote about inflation isn't that bad, right? Doesn't it's just 2-3% or something like that, right? Come on, that's just a little bit. Doesn't hurt that people that much. If folks are watching this and you're feeling that back in the 90s you were making a lot less money than you were today, but somehow today you're still kind of finding yourself struggling to pay the mortgage, as if, how is this possible? Well, when the Fed was originally set up, it had two goals, right, or two mandates, right? It's to keep prices stable and keep full employment, whatever that is defined as. They somehow forgot about the keep prices stable one, and somewhere down the road came up with this. Well, we're going to keep inflation low, and so now we've got this target inflation rate of 2% a year, right? Where did that come from? I don't know, and why 2%? But we all know that recently, in the last few years, inflation's been much higher than that. What you may not realize is, if you're wondering why you feel like you haven't really gotten ahead 30 years after the 90s, and you've been in the workforce forever, and you have on paper your income is more than it was back then, right? And yet somehow it still feels like you're not getting as many groceries in your shopping bag as you used to. Um, let's just take 3.5% inflation, okay, which I kind of think is lowballing it. The Fed, when they say we have 2% inflation, they're not counting a lot of stuff in the market, right? So at 2.5% inflation over 40 years, so you live to, let's say, average person lives to 80. So in half your lifetime, 40 years of 3.5% inflation will quadruple prices from what
Wow.
they were. Quadruple prices in 40 years. So you wonder why you're not getting ahead, why you still feel like you're grinding it out, and you're making so much more money now. Inflation, dude, it killed you. So, I mean, yeah, inflation is the worst.
Yeah. Um,
Let's-
it's very short, but you're absolutely right. One quick correction: the dual mandate didn't happen when the Fed was created. It was much. It was just supposed to be a backstop and a bunch of other crony stuff that came
okay,
in the
sure.
'70s. And I actually feel bad making fun of Christina Romer, because I thought about what she said, and it makes sense to me now.
Oh, okay.
Remember, she said, quote, money printing tends to lower the price of the dollar,
Mm-hmm.
which is good for ordinary families. Now, that seems insane and backwards, but I figured out what she meant.
Oh, she's talking about imports. Yeah.
No, no,
No.
no, no.
No?
She's talking about, I mean, the only way it makes perfect sense is if she's talking about people actually receiving physical fiat dollars and eating them.
Right.
If you don't want to buy goods and services, but instead actually just want to eat the paper and ink, well, then Christina Romer, it's
Perfect.
brilliant. It's really
Perfect.
brilliant. Thanks for the help,
Thanks
government
for the help.
agent.
Thanks for the help. All right. Well, let's continue on with chapter 16. All right. Now we get to a bugaboo of libertarians everywhere. The title of this chapter is How the Fed Fits In. As we saw in lesson 2, a free price system drives consumer prices down, not up. It gives us a gradual reduction in prices, exactly what we should want. Falling consumer prices are the payoff for learning to produce goods and services more and more productively. Innovation and productivity, along with accompanying consumer price reductions, define economic progress. They are especially helpful to the poor, who can buy more and more with limited means. For everyone, but especially for the poor, rising prices are a threat and also an admission of economic failure. For most of the decades prior to the founding of the United States Federal Reserve, U.S. prices fluctuated but ended up where they started. A loaf of bread cost no more at the dawn of the 20th century than it had during the Revolutionary War. 2 years after the U.S. Federal Reserve began operations in 1914, consumer price inflation soared. Since the Fed was charged with controlling inflation, this was not a good harbinger for the future. Thereafter, prices tended to peak and crater, but mostly rose. As the Fed's first century passed, the dollar had lost a stunning 97% of its purchasing power, 90% just from 1950. By 2014, a consumer needed $33 to buy what $1 would have bought in 1914. Millionaires, defined as people with a net worth of $1 million, were no longer even classed as rich. Fed Chairman Paul Volcker, who was deservedly admired and had temporarily beaten back inflation during his tenure, conceded that, quote, if the overriding objective is price stability, we did a better job with the 19th century gold standard or even with free banking, unquote. After Volcker, government statistics about the rate of inflation also became increasingly unreliable, especially during and after the Clinton administration. The changes tended to depress the reported numbers, which also served to reduce Social Security payments owed by the government. Without these changes, the reported loss of purchasing power since the founding of the Fed would look much worse. Why and how has this happened? To get to the bottom of this question, we must first ask what causes consumer price inflation. A popular idea is that prices rise when an economy grows too fast and becomes overheated. But economic growth means that more goods and services are being produced. This increase in supply, as noted previously, should tend to reduce, not increase prices. By far, the most important reason that prices rise and stay high is that government has printed new money and injected it into the economy, either directly or through the banking system. So, printed is in quotes, and there's a little footnote that reads the word printed. This refers to electronic means of creating money, not just printing of paper bills.
Sorry, Christina.
As the amount of money circulating rises relative to the supply of goods and services, the price of those goods and services expressed in dollars naturally rises. A simple example may help to make this clear. If the economy consisted entirely of two knives and $2, it would be logical for each knife to be priced at $1. But if the amount of money doubles to $4 without any more knives being produced, the price of each of the two existing knives would be expected to rise to $2. Economist Milton Friedman summed this up in a famous passage, quote, just as an excessive increase in the quantity of money is the one and only important cause of inflation, so a reduction in the rate of monetary growth is the one and only cure for inflation, unquote. This is not entirely true. Consumer expectations about the amount of money that will be created drives consumer price inflation even more than the actual amount that has been created. But the two are closely linked, so Friedman's point is still valid. The Federal Reserve is responsible for, and in many ways seeks to control the quantity of money in the U.S. It therefore follows that the Fed is responsible for the dollar's collapse in purchasing power since 1914. Looking more closely at the dollar's loss of purchasing power, 90% was lost just since 1950, and most of that since 1971. What happened in 1971?
What could it be?
when the last link of the dollar to gold reserves was severed by the Nixon administration. The requirement of maintaining some gold reserve backing the dollar had acted as a brake, however weak, on dollar creation. Ironically, one of the framers of the Federal Reserve Act, Senator Elihu Root, had considered making a 100% gold backed dollar part of the legislation, but concluded it was unnecessary. He told colleagues the U.S. government would never dare to issue paper currency backed by nothing. The framers of the Constitution, including Alexander Hamilton, had assumed the same. As Hamilton pointed out in a letter, the problem with US dollars backed by nothing is that the government can create as many of them as it wishes without any restraint at all, which is exactly what it did after 1971. So there's another footnote about this Hamilton letter. And it's just a note, it's just an excerpt from the letter. But yeah, Hamilton wanted a central bank, but he specifically warned against governments or central banks printing paper money. Okay. I guess that redeems Hamilton 10% in my eye.
He just wanted it for crony reasons, not for inflationary reasons.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And an unrestrained flood of new dollars will eventually undermine the economy either by creating too much debt or by setting off hyperinflation, either in consumer prices or asset prices or both. Hamilton did not object to private banks issuing notes that were the equivalent of paper money. That was different because it could be regulated by market forces. If a private bank overdid it, it will return upon the bank.
Unless, say, the government steps in and makes a bank holiday, which means that they don't have to actually make good on the promises that they made. So it sort of enshrines the fraud into law,
Yeah.
in case they did anything like that.
So the key point about asset inflation is one that is really key to understand. Bob Murphy famously predicted we'd go into there'd be some big inflation following the 2008 crash with all the money printing and the bailouts that the government did, and it never came to pass. It just, oops, what happened? Austrian economic theory destroyed. And
Well,
you'll
one
maybe
of the
have to.
things that happened is that the Fed paid banks not to issue loans.
Right. So what happened is a lot of that money just went into the stock market.
Yeah.
And so take a look at the stock market from 2008 to today. You tell me that the Dow Jones is worth 40,000, 42,000 or whatever it's at right now. Give me a break.
Every asset class has to be some kind of a bubble.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, sort of most famously, but gold more than doubled in the last 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it more than 8x'd since the early 2000s.
Yep.
That's a function of inflation. It
That's
is
that that's
perverse.
yep.
It's
Yep.
perverse that the talking heads all tell us that a growing economy causes inflation.
Right.
Just like Miss Romer, that's just insane. It's exactly opposite. When you increase your capital accumulation and increase your productivity and your skill, prices go down, not up.
Yep.
It's just ludicrous. And I love it when they try and blame general price inflation on other areas where they've screwed up the economy, like making energy more expensive. Well, rising energy costs, that's inflationary. Well,
Right.
no, not if you weren't expanding the money supply. If the money supply was stable, higher prices in one area would have to mean lower prices in some other area. But no, you get this general price inflation, and that's all because of counterfeiting.
Right.
It's all at the feet of the central bank.
Yep. All right. Chapter 17. The Fed's conflict of interest. Ooh, a little play on the word interest, maybe. It is asking for malfeasance to have a government financier able to create money at will. It is a fantasy to think that any institution can centrally plan an economy. To combine these roles in the same institution also represents a truly massive and destructive conflict of interest. It is an invitation for the government to do whatever it believes will best serve its short term interests, such as paying off friends and getting through the next election, rather than what will serve the long term interests of the nation. And it is an invitation that government officials have readily accepted. Okay, so then he looks like he breaks this chapter up into a couple of parts. So this part is subtitled Financier. Since the Fed was created by an act of Congress, why does Congress not step in to reform the agency? Thibault de Saint-Phal,
That was a
author of
game. That was a game effort, my friend.
author of The Federal Reserve and Intentional Mystery, explains that, quote, no one in Congress ever points out it is the Fed itself that creates inflation. The reason for this is that the Fed, by financing the federal deficit year after year, makes it possible for Congress to continue to spend far more than it collects in tax revenues. If it were not for Fed action, Congress would have to curb its spending habits dramatically. Unquote. What exactly does St. Paul, St. Alex mean
Well,
by this? How does the Fed finance government deficit spending when it creates new money? In most cases, this is done indirectly. So here's the trick: the government borrows money by selling a bond, let us say to a bank. The Federal Reserve then buys the bond from the bank with newly printed money. In effect, the government sells a bond to itself, but very few people understand what is happening. Most people believe that the largest creditors of the US government, buyers of its bonds, are the Japanese and Chinese governments. This is not correct. The largest owner of US government bonds is the US government itself, operating through the Federal Reserve. I mean, man, what a racket. I sure would like to be able to sell myself and then buy it back from myself and count it, say I got double the money. I mean, it's
it's even more impressive. Like we've sort of known the fraud that is counterfeiting for a long time. But to be able to do it right in front of everybody's eyes and call it monetary policy and fiscal
right.
policy, oh, you demons. Demonic.
A government is expected to finance itself through taxes. Historically, governments hard up for money have also created new currency to spend. If a central bank buys a government bond, it is the functional equivalent of printing new money. Whatever the method, taxes, currency printing, or buying bonds, the result is to transfer resources from the private sector to government. To see this more clearly, assume that an economy consists of $1 and miscellaneous goods and services. Government may either levy 25 cents in taxes or print 33.3 cents in new money for its own use. Either way, government now has the wherewithal to command 25% of all economy wide goods and services. 25 cents is a quarter of $1, and 33.3 cents is a quarter of $1 plus 33.3 cents.
Math is fun.
What?
I think it tracks.
And 33 cents is a quarter of $1 plus 30.
Yeah, what's a quarter of $1.33?
Oh. Got it. Yeah. Porcupine ain't good at math, guys.
He's just a little porcupine.
Private businesses and individuals are left with 75 cents. Even if governments do not create money in order to finance their own deficits directly, an expansion of the money supply will still enable them to borrow more. This is because rising consumer prices steadily reduce the real value of the debt. If I lend $1,000 to anyone, the borrower gets $1,000 in purchasing power. If the borrower repays me after 20 years, and there has been inflation of a little over 3.5% a year in the interim, I only get back $500 in purchasing power. The US government is fully aware that inflation allows the borrower to slip out of contractual debt without default, right? Because they only have to pay it back in nominal dollars,
Hmm.
right? Not inflation adjusted dollars. Um, as federal debt exploded following the crash of 2008, it became clear that the Bernanke Fed hoped to inflate away the massive debt, but to do so slowly enough to avoid setting off alarms among lenders, which could lead to a bond buyer strike and spiraling interest rates. All right, this next subsection is called central planner. In 1977, Congress gave the Fed an additional mandate: bring down unemployment. This enabled the Fed to regard itself as our national economic planner. This was done even though the Fed's creation of new dollars was the single leading contributor to economic bubbles, followed by crashes in the late 1910s and 1920s before the new mandate, as well as during the late 1990s and 2000s after the new authority was in place. Even after these calamities, textbooks and media commentators still pretend that the Fed helps stabilize the economy.
You're killing. You're kidding me. Go ahead and pull the other one.
Economic writer Jeffrey Madrick wrote after the crash of 2008, quote, by 1913, the U.S. federal government created a stable financial system with the creation of the Federal Reserve, unquote. It's been so stable, Adam, for over 100 years.
Bask
So
in the
stable.
stability. Just bask in it.
Well, it's been stable in its unstableness. Deep
Profound.
thoughts.
Profound.
This was runaway wishful thinking. Economist Milton Friedman got it right again when he said that, quote, the severity of each of the major economic contractions is directly attributable to acts of the reserve authorities and would not have occurred under earlier monetary and banking arrangements, unquote. Note that Freeman wrote this in 1962, long before the Fed provoked calamities of the 1970s inflation or the bubbles and crashes of the 1990s and 2008. About all this, respected economic writer James Grant writes, quote, central planning may be discredited in the broader sense, but people still believe in central planning as it is practiced by the Fed. To my mind, the Fed is a cross between the late unlamented Interstate Commerce Commission and the Wizard of Oz, unquote.
That's a good line.
Economist William Anderson compares the Fed and its leaders to
Gosplan.
oh, okay. I've never heard of that before. Okay, I was like, what? Okay. I have to read this in Russian accent.
In Russia,
Economist William Anderson, Mr. Anderson,
Mr. Anderson.
compares the Fed and its leaders to Gosplan,
Mm.
the agency charged with preparing economic plans for the Soviet Union, and thinks that it has the same chance of success. Economic writer Gene Callahan gets to the heart of the matter when he writes that the chairman of the Federal Reserve, quote, is the head price fixer of a price fixing agency, unquote. Why price fixer? This is correct because the Fed uses its control of money to fix some interest rates and manipulate others. And interest rates are among the most important prices of the economy. Ironically, former Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke told a university economics class that, quote, prices are the thermostat of an economy. They are the mechanisms by which an economy functions, unquote. Most economists agree that price controls destroy an economy. But like Bernanke and Yellen, they often wear blinders, which prevent them from seeing that everything the Fed does is a price control. The Fed also decided that the 1977 expansion of its mandate authorized it to manipulate the stock market and housing as well as the bond and money markets, an expansion of mission that has not helped the economy. At the same time, the Fed has not always paid close attention to the statute governing its mission. Although much of what it did during and after the crash of 2008 was legal, some of it was illegal. In particular, buying Fannie and Freddie mortgage backed securities. This was later addressed by amending the statute, after the fact, of course,
Hmm.
but not before the illegal activity took place on a massive scale.
Massive.
The Fed record of failure for a century speaks for itself. But it's like my favorite football team, the Vikings. Never won a Super Bowl, but gosh darn it, every year we have high hopes they're gonna do it right. Hey, the Fed's only had 100 years of absolute disasters, but maybe this year they'll get it right.
Certainly, there's no systemic problem.
Uh, the Fed record of failure for a century speaks for itself, but the prognostications of Fed leaders are not any more reassuring. Former Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke had a almost unbroken record of being wrong, although he was almost matched by his vice chairman, then successor Janet Yellen. In 2006, at the zenith of the greatest housing bubble in history, Bernanke told Congress that house prices would continue to rise. In 2007, he testified that failing subprime mortgages would not threaten the economy. In January 2008, at a luncheon, he told his audience there was no recession on the horizon. As late as July 2008, he insisted that mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, already teetering on the verge of collapse, were, quote, adequately capitalized and in no danger of failing, unquote. Let me ask you a question. I've thought about this. Do you think it's the case where they're just as stupid, or they know it but covering it up until the very last second?
I think they believe Keynes when he talks about animal spirits. I think they can breathe it into being true. I mean, they know that the stock market goes bananas every time they hiccup or fart, every time they say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they think the part of their job is to hold a stiff upper lip and proclaim that everything is okay, and
Right.
then maybe it just will be. Like, I think they're being patriotic. It's and even if they thought that they knew that this was wrong, to give up the game would mean not being able to steal money anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Who the heck wants that? So
Right.
I think there's a little bit of mental compartmentalization,
Mm.
conceptual compartmentalization, and then I think it's my job is just to filibuster. I mean, Alan Greenspan bragged after his term that he thought his job was just to go on air and speak gobbledygook in a reassuring and confident manner
Mm.
to make the markets just
Right.
keep motoring on or
Right.
whatever.
And how the news analysts analyze every word the Fed chairman said at his press conference. What did he mean by the economy is looking stable? I mean, whatever. It's like, what a joke.
The economy is perturbed, unsettled, and particularly gaseous. Ooh, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Following the crash of 2008, Bernanke's and then Yellen's Fed embarked on the most radical monetary experiment in U.S. history. It responded to a crisis caused by too much new money and debt by engineering an even greater flood of new money and debt. Harvard economist Ken Rogoff accurately summed it up by saying, quote, "We borrowed too much, we screwed up, so we're going to fix it by borrowing more," unquote. Ironically, Rogoff actually favored the policy. He just wanted an even more radical version of it. In the face of criticism, neither the Fed leaders nor any of its allied Keynesian economists ever bothered to offer logical or factual arguments explaining how this approach of creating ever more new money and piling new debt on top of bad old debt could possibly work. At her Senate confirmation hearings, Janet Yellen offered this classic example of Fed doublespeak. Ooh, I can't wait to hear this. Quote, "If we want to get back to business as usual and a normal monetary policy and normal interest rates, I would say we need to do that by getting the economy back to normal."
Oh, you're
Unquote.
hired. Miss Yellen, you're hired. That's brilliant.
What the fuck? Oh my God.
You're hired and you get a pay raise.
You just can't believe it. I mean, because when you read it out loud, it's like,
What didn't you get, Tyrone? We need to get the economy back to normal.
how informative! Exclamation point. Hunter Lewis writes, continuing on. Yellen brushed off an observation by Senator Mike Johans, Republican Nebraska, that Fed stimulus is putting the economy on an unsustainable sugar high, or a similar reference by Senator Pat Toomey, Republican Pennsylvania, to the monetary morphine drip the Fed has been administering. At a later congressional hearing, Yellen reported that, quote, progress on price stability has been notably absent, unquote. In her Orwellian doublespeak, the word stability actually meant consumer price inflation. Translated, this meant that the agency charged by law with preventing consumer price inflation had sought to increase it, but its efforts had failed. Dude, don't spit out your drink.
It's always close.
Oh my God.
These people are
Dude.
unbelievable.
A number of highly respected economists have concluded that the Fed's post crash of 2008 new money creation backfired, even in purely Keynesian terms, the terms in which the Fed itself thought. Lower interest rates were intended to increase borrowing and spending and thus economic demand, but that turned out to count for less than the lost demand from lenders earning little or no interest. Similar to the point he made in the previous chapter about um, debasing the currency in order to what was it, increase imports, but that doesn't take into account that other countries will just debase their currency even faster and greater. So like you can't win that race. You can't win the race to the bottom.
I got a bit of a heroin problem, but if I could just pump myself full of a little more heroin.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a better analogy, definitely. You gotta take more drugs to get that same high as you build up a tolerance,
It
right?
really works until you're dead.
Right. Moreover, banks chose to hold back from lending when rates were artificially low and expected to rise, because that's what banks do. I'm in the finance industry. You're always projecting where do you think rates are going to be in the future. So if you think that a year from now rates are going to be higher, why would you lend the money now at a lower rate? Especially when there's other factors like the Federal Reserve started paying interest on excess reserves so they could just park the money at the Fed and earn more interest than loaning it out to people. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
It seems crazy until you realize again that 5 seconds after issuing the mortgage, they'll just sell it off to the government in the form of
Right.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And who the hell cares? I earned my $500 commission and everything's
Yeah.
everything's rosy.
Even a largely sympathetic observer, Mohammed El Arian, former CEO of the giant bond manager PIMCO, estimated that Fed's activities added as little as 40 billion to economic output, or 1/4% of GDP in the first 4 years after the crash. Other economists thought the contribution was negative. The Fed insisted that it could reverse all the new money it had conjured up anytime it wished. Ben Bernanke said on 60 Minutes that he was 100% confident of being able to do so. But respected economist John Hussman called Fed's post 2008 policies a quote, roach motel, easy to get into, but hard to get out of, unquote. He calculated that raising short term interest rates back to 2%, a very low rate by historical standards, would have required the Fed to sell at least $1.5 trillion of securities on the open market. Who would buy those securities? Since World War II, the US government has counted on foreign central banks to buy US treasuries, not purchased by the Fed. These foreign central banks, like the Fed, are using newly created money. but their willingness to hold more U.S. debt has sharply waned in recent years. Some foreign central banks, including China's and Russia's, appear to be openly hostile to the current global monetary system in which the US dollar has special reserve status. They want to replace it. What year was this book written? I'm assuming it was before BRICS came on, so it's a little bit prescient. 2017. So yeah, the what's the saying? It was in the wind. You know, you
It was in the wind.
could
Yep.
smell it in the wind. It was coming. The fear of not finding buyers for federal bonds, with the subsequent collapse of the federal bond market, may be exactly what triggered the Fed's radical actions in the face of the 2008 crisis. The Fed may have done what it did not to rescue Main Street, as it said, but to rescue Wall Street, with the understanding that Wall Street would thereby be able to keep buying more government bonds itself. So, yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of local governments, like for their pension funds and things like that, by law are required to buy U.S. treasuries. So, to have it at as a certain percentage, because it's a riskless asset. It's backed by the full faith and guarantee of the United States government. Adam, you can't lose on it.
Speaking of spitting out my coffee, I believe I literally did that in 1988 when my econ professor or finance professor told me that government securities are a riskless asset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, they're just selling it to themselves, basically. It is illegal for the Fed to buy bonds directly from the government with its newly created money. It needs Wall Street as an intermediary to buy the bonds before selling them back to the Fed. I mean, this is such a con game. It's literally 3-card Monte or something like that. If this sounds like a shell game, I was just about to say shell game. I should have said shell. It is because it is a shell game. Where's the treasury? The Fed invented the term quantitative easing to describe its favored method of creating trillions of new dollars following the 2008 crash. Mainstream media commentators add to the confusion by calling it bond buying, deliberately omitting the pertinent fact that the bond buying was done with money created out of thin air. Other, even more radical policies were developed for possible future use. Thus
Ain't it the
ends
truth?
Chapter 17.
I almost thought he should rename the chapter, also known as counterfeiting for fun and profit.
Oh yeah, that'd be perfectly good.
It's a shell game. It's an attempt at a free lunch. It's this weird ultimate steal from Peter to pay Paul, who loans some stuff back to Peter.
Yeah.
Mary gets involved in there somewhere. Once you understand what's going on with the Fed, you'll either want to grab torches and pitchforks or you'll want to drink yourself into the grave, because it's just a crime. It's an over 100-year-long crime, and nobody really thinks about it.
Yep, that's right. All right, well, we are getting very close. Only one more episode, folks, that you have to suffer through of the Porcupine's awesome pronunciation and mathematical genius.
Come for the economics erudition. Stay for the fun with word pronunciation. Thank you for your yeoman's work, good sir. One more chapter till we get to the 100. What does he call them? The 100 economic laws. These are going to be a lot of fun. So thank you, sir. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sticking with us for another episode of Haman Nature. Come visit our Substack, HamanNature.com, and go over to our YouTube page and like and subscribe so we can get monetized. In fact, tell your family for the holidays that the present you really want is for them to go to Haman Nature on YouTube and like and subscribe. Do it for the poor porcupine who Rory Tories himself through the pronunciation of these crazy words. Roni Tories.
What up, crony?
We'll catch you next time on Haman Nature.